Hi y'all and welcome back. So this is a video that I've thought about doing many times in the past, but because it's a little closer to like family history, genealogy, not so much the type of history that I study academically, I kind of just kept putting it off like, I don't know how well this suits the channel. Um, but last week I ended up getting a call and I needed to go home to my hometown for a week to take care of some things because my dad passed. That's actually that picture up there on the shelf. That's him. And while I was up there taking care of things, more than once I thought to myself, I'm really glad I asked about this, or I'm really glad I already had this. And I went through the same thing when my granddad passed 3 years ago. It was just the same kind of train of thought where I'm like, gosh, I am so glad that I asked about this while I had the chance, or I got a copy of this while I had the chance. So I wanted to put these things to y'all in a video. I know many people who are interested in history are already interested in genealogy. You may have already done this stuff. But if you haven't done it, I want to encourage you to consider putting in that time and effort, because you never know how many more opportunities you will have to do that. So I'm just going to kind of list a few things that I did, or things that you might want to consider, just to give you ideas. The first thing that I did that I've been thinking, I'm so glad I did this. I actually had that thought 3 years ago when my granddaddy passed, because he had these photo albums with all these old pictures. But of course, when it's old pictures and you didn't meet those people, you don't necessarily know who they are, it can be hard to appreciate them. So he let me borrow his photo album, and I went like to the Walmart photo center or whatever it was, and I made copies of all these old pictures. And then I went back to his apartment and I sat with him and we went over every single picture, and he told me who it was, and I made a note on the back so that I would know in the future who these people were and how they were connected to me. And so for me, I ended up really, really glad I did, not just because it's helpful to know who people are, but because I have no idea what happened to his photo albums after he passed. I kind of assumed that my dad ended up with them, but in the last week I've realized there was no sign of them in his stuff. So if I hadn't asked when I did, and I actually did all that, probably like 7 or 8 years ago. I'm not quite sure. But if I hadn't done it back then, I would just be out of luck. I would not have all these family heirlooms, essentially, is how I look at them. And I was really glad that I did. So if you have someone in your life that has a bunch of older pictures and you might not know who everyone is, this is the time to do it. Get copies and ask questions. The next thing is you can do, it's kind of like a survey. And my mom and I did this when I was a kid. We made up this survey where we asked all my grandparents, their names, their birthdays, their parents' names, birthdays, basically as far back as they could remember. And we asked a bunch of questions about their childhood. What was your first car? What's a memory that sticks out from your childhood? Whatever. I can't remember what all the questions were, but it doesn't have to be the exact same ones. Anyway, so we gave this like in written form, and then they took their time to consider their answers, filled it out, and gave it back. Not all my grandparents did this. I think a number of them assumed that I wouldn't be interested. But 2 of them did it, and I treasure those to this day. Partly because of the stories that were in there, and partly because it's in their handwriting, which is kind of nice to have. So the next thing is sitting down with them and asking them to tell you stories, and just using like a voice recorder. You can use Apple on your phone. An example, I had a grandmother that was in a nursing home for over a decade. And when it got to the point where I could tell that she was starting to, I don't want to say forget, but I don't really know a better way of putting it right at the moment. But when I was there, each time I went to visit, I would ask her just a random question, I think one time I asked her like what her favorite wildflower was. But I recorded it on my phone. And I have those recordings backed up somewhere. I don't know where at the moment because we've moved so many times, but I have it, and it's it makes me happy to know that that's there, that I can review. In those cases, I actually did like a video, use the video camera, so I have her, like the image of her talking in addition to her voice, which is really cool. And then the last thing you might want to consider is DNA. And DNA is a little tricky because I know a lot of us are like, well, do we really want to have our DNA information out there? But here's why, if you're going to do it, if you have an interest in this, it is better to ask your parents, your grandparents, whoever's available to do it, either in addition to you doing it or in lieu of you doing it. And here's why. When we have children, each parent contributes exactly 50% of their DNA to that child. So for every bit of DNA that my dad gave me, there was another bit of DNA that I did not get. So when you look at DNA for the purposes of ancestry, each generation loses information. So if you get your own DNA results, there's going to be a lot of information that you don't get from that because it just didn't happen to be part of that 50% that kept getting passed down. So if you can get a parent or a grandparent to do that test, then you're going to get more information than you would just by going off your own. You'll get information because you'll know which branch of the family this stuff came from, but also because you'll be able to get information that kind of goes a couple more generations back because, like I said, they have genetic information that you probably don't. At least not all of it. So, even though it's kind of a depressing thought, I just wanted to put this out there. I know that some of my viewers are kind of younger, and I love to see your interest in history. But if you're younger, that also means you probably have a lot of opportunities still available to you to get this information, to ask these questions, to find out everything you can now. And I just wanted to give some food for thought there because, like I said, it had been very meaningful for me, especially over this last week, to know I have that. I still have that part of them, and I have those memories that I can cherish that otherwise I probably wouldn't have known. So, thanks so much, guys, and I will see you next time.